Good evening, everybody. I think we're ready to go. Welcome to this, the 2020 Refugee Legal, not the annual dinner. Thanks very much for joining us. My name is Tom. I'm going to be your host for this evening, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm on the lands of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people. And I'd like to extend that respect and acknowledgement to the elders and the peoples of all the nations represented by tonight's call. I'm sure there are people here right across the country. I'd also like to acknowledge the extraordinary work of First Nations activists who fight for justice, not only for First Nations people, but also for the rights and dignity of refugees and people seeking asylum. It's an extraordinary thing for First Nations people to do. It's very generous, and we appreciate it very much. This was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land, sovereignty never ceded. Welcome to tonight, to another one of these things via Zoom. This is going to be a really enjoyable evening, and we're so glad that you could join us. Tonight, we are celebrating all the incredible work that Refugee Legal does in helping people seeking asylum, refugees, and migrants, and to just, celebrate what a fantastic year 2020 has been. Just the best year ever. And here we are together having a grand old time. My name is Tom Ballard. I'm honored to be hosting this event once again. Obviously, I'm very busy at the moment, just flat out with gigs, huge amounts of money pouring into my bank accounts. I booked to do a cruise next week. That should be fun. And I'm actually doing so well professionally right now. I've agreed to do tonight at half my corporate fee because that's the kind of guy I am. I do that joke every year and I refuse to drop it. Thank you so much for making the effort. I know particularly if you've done a lot of Zoom things in your life this year, attending tonight on a Thursday is a tricky thing. And we appreciate you joining us very much indeed. There is no dinner and there's no alcohol, but you're still here. At least you don't have to dress up, That's quite good. I'm currently wearing tracksuit pants because after 8 months of lockdown, they are the only pants that fit me. I don't know about you, but thanks to COVID, I don't know how to use a belt anymore. David Mann, I can see your little face. I'm not. Oh, right. Hi. Okay, you want to keep your face there? You can turn your video off, maybe. There we go. No offense, David. It's just, I view you as kind of a father figure, and you being on screen watching me as I try to do jokes is quite intimidating. That's a great thing about doing these gigs too. I just presume that you're all laughing, so I haven't bothered to write much funny stuff at all. It's been a tough year for everyone, of course, particularly for those of us in Victoria. I think the toughest part of this year has been that day when, we found out that Dan Andrews told us we could only have 1 hour of exercise a day. And it's like, I have to shrink down to 1 hour a day? Really? Thanks a lot, Chairman Dan. I think my favorite restriction story came out of Queensland. At one point earlier in the year, Queensland had a restriction where you could go to a Queensland nightclub, but you weren't allowed to dance. And the Premier of Queensland was asked about this, and she said, it's fine, people can still sit down and listen to the music. And I just couldn't imagine anything worse than sitting in a nightclub in the Fortitude Valley and having to really listen to the music. Just really listen to the lyrics of a Veronica song and try and understand what they're saying. And it's of course been a wild year. From a comedian's point of view, it's been a wild ride because COVID did start out quite funny. I'm not sure if you remember at the start of the year, it was called coronavirus. Corona's like a beer. We're all laughing at that. People were talking about toilet paper. It was very funny. Then Tom Hanks got it and we were like, shit, this is serious. Okay. Woody from Toy Story is sick. It's a very serious situation. Then Richard Wilkins got it and it was funny again. And we were laughing, we were having a good time, right? Richard Wilkins. Then a baby tested positive. It was very, very sad. Then Peter Dutton got it. And it's like, not only is it funny, it's like my hero now. And I actually respect the virus and think it's doing fantastic work. So it's been a real roller coaster. Pause for laugh. But obviously it's been tough for all of us. Things were already extremely tough and serious for people seeking asylum and immigrants and refugees in this country, trapped as they are in immigration detention or trapped in that kind of legal limbo. Tonight, as we reflect on the great work that Refugee Legal has done, we'll also be hearing about some of those extraordinary challenges that have come up for those people, the kind of people that Refugee Legal help, and what 2020 and COVID has meant for them. I mean, to me, there is this weird small irony that millions of Australians this year did get a very, very small taste of what it's like to have your freedom severely restricted, the kind of toll that can take, particularly when it's indefinite and you don't know when it's going to end. And while our experience surely doesn't compare at all to people in immigration detention in this country, there is that small empathetic experience that I hope some of our fellow citizens have taken on board and used to gain an insight into the experience of people who have come to this country asking for help, and we've treated them the way that we do. Throughout all that toughness, Refugee Legal has persevered. They have risen to the challenge of this year, and thankfully they've been able to continue doing the amazing work that they do. I've always been grateful and very happy to be an ambassador for Refugee Legal and support them in everything they do, because they continue on their mission and their fight for the rights and dignity of people seeking asylum in this country. They do an amazing job of that. They seriously help people, they change people's lives, and they are a constant, clear moral force against the way that we treat really vulnerable people who are just asking for our help in this country. And they remind us that the way we do things when it comes to immigration is cruel and unnecessary, and there is a better way. And we as a country and as a people can collectively be better than that. So tonight we're going to be sharing with you some reflections on what 2020 has been like from Refugee Legal's point of view and some of the amazing work that they've been doing. And we're going to be treated to a keynote speech from a very special guest, the award-winning writer, journalist, and former detainee on Manus Island, Behrouz Boochani, who's going to be joining us live from New Zealand, which is a really special thing indeed. Plus, we have a chance for you to ask questions to Behrouz and the Executive Director of Refugee Legal, David Mann. You'll see down the bottom there's a little Q&A function. If you want to click on that and submit a question throughout the night, we would love to hear from you. We won't be able to get to all of them, I'm afraid, but any and all questions that you'd like to send Behrouz's or David's way, we will have some time to go through them and have a discussion tonight, perhaps reflecting on the year that's been and what's next. So please get involved there. The chat function is also open. Feel free to use that. Comment if you would like to comment how funny I am. I'd appreciate that. My mum and dad are watching tonight, so yeah, I always appreciate your encouragement, mum and dad. If you'd like to comment on my extremely boring apartment, feel free to do so. You'd be welcome. Just use the chat function. And look at that, 173 participants. That is a fantastic effort for a Thursday night. So thank you very much. All right, now to give us a formal welcome to tonight's proceedings and to get things going, it is my pleasure to introduce Refugee Legal's Committee of Management Chair, Claire Morton. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Tom, and good evening, everyone. I would like also to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, noting with people from all around Australia with us this evening. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. On behalf of the Committee of Management of Refugee Legal, I'm delighted to extend a very warm welcome to you all as we celebrate 32 years of providing free legal assistance to the most vulnerable asylum seekers, refugees, and disadvantaged migrants. While I would really have liked to welcome you all in person, I'm still very pleased that we're able to meet virtually for this annual event. I particularly welcome and thank Tom Ballard, one of our ambassadors, for being our MC tonight, and Behrouz Boochani, who is joining us from New Zealand as our keynote speaker. Behrouz will be introduced to you all shortly. The annual dinner is the key event for Refugee Legal, where our staff, our volunteers, our partners, our benefactors, and all the friends of Refugee Legal come together to reflect on the year gone by and the challenges that await us. This year, as you all know, has been tough for everyone, but particularly for people who seek our help, whose vulnerabilities have been exacerbated by the pandemic. However, despite the challenges, Refugee Legal has continued to provide free legal assistance to asylum seekers, refugees, and vulnerable migrants. We've focused on defending their rights and educating the community to raise awareness. We've developed understanding and built action for change, and we've continued to build partnerships and advocate at a local, national and international level for policies which are fair, just and humane. As the COVID pandemic swept around the world, we moved swiftly to ensure the safety of the refugee legal community and adopted new ways of working with staff largely working from home. We focused on the continuity of core services to clients, protection of their rights and wellbeing and of our community. Despite working from home, staff adapted and rose to the many challenges to continue to deliver our vital services to so many people in need, differently but effectively. Through this work, we made a difference to the lives of many people in ways that matter profoundly, whether through being granted protection, reunited with family, or being granted citizenship. This work continues despite the COVID pandemic. At the same time, we significantly improved our digital capacity and capability, and we will continue to build on this over the next year. I would like to particularly thank David Mann this year for his leadership in a very difficult time. He's had to pivot Refugee Legal to new ways of working and support his managers and staff as they confront the realities of a very changed environment, both for themselves and their clients. I'd also like to thank the rest of the staff for the dedication and hard work they've shown over the last year. Together with the staff, I also want to thank our volunteers and pro bono law firm partners, all 16 of them, for their tremendous work over this year and acknowledge their commitment and skill in assisting asylum seekers, refugees and disadvantaged migrants. I also thank our many benefactors for their support, especially this year when there are so many demands on all members of our community. This support makes a direct impact and enables Refugee Legal to provide legal assistance and directly change people's lives. Finally, I'd like to thank the board members for their work over this year, for their careful consideration of important issues and their wise advice. Thank you again for your support. We do really appreciate it. And please enjoy this evening. I'll now hand back to Tom. Thank you, Tom.
No worries.
Very loud applause.
We gotta provide some atmosphere somehow. Thank you very much, Claire, for those lovely words. And yes, reflecting on the challenges of this year. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of this evening.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Now, please keep in mind that you can still get drunk. Okay, I know we're not providing any booze to you, but if you're a drinker, feel free to celebrate. That's still vital. It is not the annual dinner, but it's still important. And the great thing about getting drunk is that you get generous. And of course, the normal live in-person annual dinner for Refugee Legal is a major fundraiser for the fantastic work that they do. You've already been lovely and given some money to the organisation for a ticket to attend tonight's event, unless you paid $0 and you're a real cheapskate. But whatever you did to do that, we appreciate it very, very much. And there is absolutely no obligation. But if throughout tonight you hear about the work that Refugee Legal does, and you've got some spare cash floating around, as I do, again, a very successful comedian when all comedy has been cancelled, please do consider making a donation to Refugee Legal to allow them to keep doing what they're doing. You'll hear more about this throughout tonight, but you can always go to refugeelegal.org.au/donate to chip in some cash, if you can spare it, to help Refugee Legal providing the free legal service and advice to people who really need it. Oh, here we go. I think David's ready to go. Now it is my honor to introduce, to give a reflection on 2020 and address you tonight as part of the Not the Annual Dinner, the Executive Director of Refugee Legal, Mr. David Mann. Over to you, David. Just pop on your video. There you go. There's your face. And I'll hand over to you, sir. Oh, I'm afraid you're on mute as well. You need to pop yourself.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks very much, Tom. And good evening and welcome, friends and fellow human rights seekers. And thanks to Tom, a Refugee Legal Ambassador, for being our MC again tonight. Well, what a year it's been. It's not, of course, been possible to gather in person this year for obvious reasons for the Refugee Legal Annual Dinner, but we still wanted to continue the tradition, and like so many dimensions this year, we're doing it differently. And I guess out of this year, there have been a whole range of opportunities that have sprung up, and one of them is actually tonight, where we actually have a wider guest list. And on that issue, I really want to make a special call out and a special welcome to interstate and overseas guests this evening, who wouldn't obviously be able to usually attend the dinner. This year has been a story in two parts. In the first part, we continued to defend people's legal rights, to educate the community, to raise awareness of injustices, build partnerships, and take action for change. This work was epitomised by our lead role in the Medivac work to ensure that critically ill people in PNG and on Nauru were evacuated to Australia for urgent medical treatment, and well over 200 people were evacuated to Australia. With partners, we fought tirelessly to save the Medivac laws from repeal, but ultimately in vain. In stark contrast, the second part has been dominated by the global pandemic. With COVID-19 affecting us all in extraordinary ways, so many people seeking protection and vulnerable migrants have been at even greater risk and in desperate need of our help and protection. This crisis has compounded their vulnerabilities. The dangers have been even more acute for people detained. People have been trapped in cramped and overcrowded conditions in detention centres in capital cities across this country. Standards of social distancing and isolation and impossibility, petrified of contracting COVID. Others are locked up indefinitely far away in Yonga Hill and on Christmas Island, out of sight, out of mind, and out of rights. The isolation and despair often deepen for people consigned to remote detention, and the fundamental importance of our legal work is often amplified. One man we represented was sent to Christmas Island recently, right in the middle of his case. He told us how our help continues to give him hope, but not false hope. As he choked on his words recently, he said this: "You can't get emotional on Christmas Island. You've got to remain tough. You can't show any weakness." He thanked us for the real hope we've given him in our hard advice. In this context, we can't proceed also without mention of what's high on all of our minds, and that is the fate of critically ill men evacuated from open-air prisons in PNG and in Nauru for urgent medical care, only to then be indefinitely detained in hotels in the suburbs of Melbourne and Brisbane, held under guard and under conditions which continue to take a terrible toll on their physical and psychological health and well-being, compounding the severity of their medical conditions. Many stripped of their freedom for over 8 years now. One of these men, Ramati, from his hotel window, looking over at shops and restaurants, said this recently: "I see everything, but I have no chance to touch it." Another, Saif, a Somali refugee, separated from his wife and son who were living in the community in the same state, spoke from his balcony, imprisoned in a hotel. He said this: "Let me hug my son." For all of these people, the stark truth is there are powers at the ready disposal of the government and the minister personally to release these men from detention immediately in the public interest as per the legal test. And the question which keeps being asked is, why? For what purpose? Why is it deemed necessary to keep refugees and asylum seekers locked up for a protracted period or at all under what's akin to imprisonment? It underscores the extremity, I think, of the deterrence agenda and a political culture of immigration absolutism and cruel indifference to the plight of people who have arrived seeking our protection and a safe home. We have a profound problem with liberty in this country. Detention policy continues to be punitive, arbitrary, unnecessary, and harmful. It continues to harm people who have fled from harm, often severely and sometimes irreparably. It continues to represent one of the great injustices of our times and to make perpetration of other injustices possible. We, in partnership with others, are continuing to explore ways to challenge the detention of individuals and to wrest back their freedom. Through our legal work this year, we have again secured the release of people from prolonged detention. I'll come to one of these cases shortly. We're also working with many others to build action for more fundamental change, starting with the Time for a Home campaign, seeking the release and resettlement of all people by June 2021. This is the work we do. And it underlies the very real contribution that you and others continue to make that enables us to do the work we do. Tonight's a special opportunity to not only take stock of this year's work, but also to focus on the profound challenges that are immediately before us and also the ones that lie ahead. And I think it's fair to say that for people seeking our help and for those defending their rights, the challenges are only becoming more grave. The pandemic has only exacerbated existing vulnerabilities and it's created new ones. But despite this, one thing is absolutely certain. We will continue to do all that we can to promote and protect the rights of vulnerable people seeking our help and in desperate need of our help, with the hope and the conviction that our work can change lives and the system. We know what injustice looks like and we know how to fight it. And then there's the other work that we do every day, and that is helping vulnerable people with predicaments that could hardly matter more. And it's about protecting people from persecution and reuniting people with loved ones. This is the work we do every day, and I mean every day. And I wanted to share a story about this work. It involves a 32-year-old Sri Lankan Tamil man. I'll call him Nalan, that's not his real name, but Nalan, who arrived in Australia by boat over 8 years ago, seeking safety. It was another 5 years after that before he was allowed to apply for protection. And 2 years after applying, in September last year that is, he was finally, for the first time since arrival, interviewed by the government about his fears for the first time. That is, it took 7 years after his arrival to be interviewed about his refugee case. Now, during the lockdown in Melbourne in April this year, Nalan received the decision in the mail from the department refusing his case and giving him a 21-day deadline to lodge his appeal paperwork. He panicked. Then he called us. We booked him immediately into one of our TPV clinics, and after a day with a pro bono law firm volunteer interstate and a refugee lawyer supervising from home in Melbourne, client at home, interpreter in another part of the country online, the legal paperwork was completed within the deadline. At the end of this process, Nalan told us how empowering it was to have been listened to and helped at his time of need, despite his ordeal. Now, another great victory, and one I think for the ages this year, was this time for a man that we act for who was assisted by two of our lawyers, Rajat and Rachel. And this man arrived by boat in 2013 and was detained thereafter until recently. And after 3 court remittals, including from the High Court, 4 reviews before the Immigration Assessment Authority under the fast track system, substantial psychiatric support from Cabrini Refugee Health, judicial review work by Victoria Legal Aid, and ongoing representation by us at the Immigration Assessment Authority, our client was recently approved on his 4th IAA review, his 4th review. So it's been a remarkable sector collaboration, and our client cried with relief and joy when he heard the news. He's since been freed after 7 years in detention and taken his first steps of freedom in the Australian community. What a mighty effort and an inspiring outcome. It's another stark reminder that our legal work, staying the course, so often makes a fundamental difference to the lives and the liberty of people facing injustice. Now, I briefly want to put our work in perspective for a moment and to refer to the global crisis. The scale of the numbers forced to flee from their homes worldwide since the Second World War has reached an unprecedented 79.5 million. That is almost 9 million more people than last year. That is 79.5 million people forcibly displaced, which represents 1 in every 97 people on the planet. There continues to be a global crisis which really has only deepened during the pandemic and has intensified the vulnerability of the already vulnerable and those really with the least protection already. But that global challenge comes with a local reality that continues to confront us across the country. Across the country, unmet legal need for people seeking asylum, for refugees and vulnerable migrants is endemic and escalating. Many asylum seekers, refugees and migrants have been suffering in the community on temporary visas or no visa at all, deliberately excluded from access to the most basic supports, struggling to survive. For these women, men and children, there is no financial safety net. And amidst a public health emergency this year, there has been no universal access provided in relation to Medicare, no universal access to Medicare, and significant barriers for many people to obtain COVID testing and basic medical care. As well, there is a slow motion crisis of 31,000 people still in legal limbo, deprived of the ability to rebuild their lives with a sense of safety and security together with us. Thousands of people still awaiting their first decision or review decision of their refugee case after arriving 8 years ago. And those already granted temporary protection now having to replead their case for at best another 3 or 5 year visa and facing indefinite, if not permanent, separation from family stuck in danger overseas. This continues to comprise a very significant priority in our work and will continue to, as well as our work for change to seek abolition of this terribly damaging policy, which I think constitutes one of the most fundamentally flawed public policies in the last generation. Despite all of this and the challenges posed by the pandemic, refugee legal has not scaled back. Far from it. We acted differently, we acted early, and we acted differently, adapting swiftly to maintain all frontline services remotely. The refugee legal pandemic response strategy has been three-pronged: continuity of legal services, protection of client rights, and the safety and well-being of clients, and honing core frontline services and operations. And this means that all of our critical core services, from telephone advice to night service, from our special TPV clinics to full casework representation and strategic litigation, have been provided daily during the pandemic by our legal team, working from their homes, together with the growing ranks of volunteers across the country. And I'm delighted to report this evening that this year, total client assistance reached 10,977. We met acute need, including amidst the pandemic, powered by your support. Through our work, so many people have been granted protection, freed from detention, evacuated to safety, better protected from family violence, or have had their residency restored. Staff, volunteers and pro bono lawyers have done what they do best: provide expert legal help, help which comes with a huge heart. This work has resulted in so many remarkable wins for clients which have changed the course of their lives for the better. As well, in partnership with other leading legal advocates, we've continued our strategic work for change by challenging unfair government decisions and systemic injustices. And in the last year, as I mentioned before, we've secured the release of clients after years of indefinite detention. As the federal government sought to erode even more rights under cover of the pandemic through the introduction of draconian laws, or the attempt to introduce draconian laws to ban mobile phones in detention and expand the powers to cancel visas, we advocated at Senate inquiries and through the media to oppose these changes. A highlight of the year was also speaking in Geneva in December to showcase our special TPV clinic model at the UNHCR Global Refugee Forum as an example of international best practice. And since then, we've continued to collaborate with key global partners to build and mobilise legal strategies to help refugees through pro bono legal partnerships. But we simply could not have risen to these challenges without ever-expanding partnerships and collaboration of a network of over 550 volunteers and 16 pro bono corporate law firm partnerships with Victoria Legal Aid as well, leading law schools, UNHCR and other international agencies, and our very generous philanthropic funders and individual donors. In such dire times, our partners have stood with us and been absolutely crucial. Ultimately, so much of our work has been powered by partnerships and the will of the community for decency and justice. And I do want to make special mention this year of the volunteers, including through our law firm partnerships, who stood up right across the country, from Brisbane to Perth and back to Melbourne, amidst the crisis, who've enabled us to expand the reach of our work, assisting people thousands of kilometres away under the supervision of our lawyers working from home. Thank you. Now, the foundation for all of this is the staff and the board, and once again, I must acknowledge the outstanding collegiality, guidance, support of our Committee of Management, and particularly the great leadership of our Chair, Claire Morton. Finally, I have the real privilege of working with a truly remarkable team of staff who go about our work tirelessly with such skill, commitment, courage, and humanity. In closing, I want to return to partnerships and the question of change, and really want to underscore that while advocacy campaigns have their place and we're involved, and then they can certainly galvanise support, raise awareness of injustices and challenge them, ultimately, real and enduring change is also so often achieved through providing direct legal help to individuals and, as a consequence, their families, their communities and our wider community. And also through direct legal action in the courts. It's also achieved through profound connections made between people through corporate partners, NGOs, students, wherever this occurs in the community. Let's continue to work together with the hope and the conviction that we can effect real change by bending the destiny of so many people in our country toward justice. That's why you and your support for Refugee Legal and those we assist is so vital, so valuable, and it's so powerful. As the world moves to post-pandemic recovery, we'll continue to draw on lessons, do things differently and build back better, underpinned by continuing to do all that we can to promote and protect the rights of vulnerable people in need of our help. As partners in our work, we deeply appreciate what you do. You do make a real difference, and together we can change the course of people's lives for the better, because what's at stake is not only the lives of people seeking asylum, but also creating the kind of society that we want to live in and defend. Thank you.
Thank you, David. That was a beautiful speech. Thank you very much for sharing with us the work of Refugee Legal this year and your commitment to the mission. That was really beautifully done. We're going to come to Q&A in a sec after our keynote speech. I'd be interested to hear from you just really quickly. Two stories that leaped out at me as potentially a small amount of good news that we saw that people might be interested in. We saw Jackie Lambie reaching out to people and asking them for their feedback on that mobile phone ban. And eventually voting it down. So the coalition did not get that through in the end. And we also had that judgment from a particular justice saying that Acting Immigration Minister Alan Tudge had acted criminally by keeping someone in detention after he thought that the appeals tribunal had got the decision wrong, and was pretty scathing in that judgment. Are those signs to you of opinion turning, of legal opinion turning, of some more avenues of good news defending the rights of refugees and people seeking asylum?
I would start by saying that what they are real examples of the importance of public will and also of action for change. That I think that it starts with recognising that if we do act, that there can be change, and whether that's acting in the courts, bringing cases. I mean, there's a sort of a famous line, I think, from one of the High Court Justice. Who once said that, courts don't go looking for cases, cases have to be brought to us. So, a case was brought, and there was a finding of as you've mentioned, about the conduct of the minister. And as a consequence, the prospect of justice for someone who had been denied it. But I also think with the mobile phone issue, again, there was a huge amount of work done around the country to highlight the gross injustice of depriving people of an essential, something that's essential to them in detention, to keep contact with friends, with family, with legal supports and other supports, and a real lifeline. And I do think that it was critical that people stood up and spoke up. And so we need to continue to exercise our will as a community for change. And I think that's the common thread for me, is if we act, there can be change. And I think that history shows that. It's easy in these times, Tom, to forget that there have been major advances in recent times. I mean, it's not long ago that women didn't have the right to vote here and elsewhere. It's not long ago that South Africa, there was apartheid, and on we could go. But I think that the common thread is people standing up and seeking change.
Yeah. Well said. Thank you very much, David. If you would like to ask David a question, or our keynote speaker, Behrouz Boochani, we would love to hear from you. You'll see down the bottom of your screen, it's about there for me, the Q&A function. Just click on that, submit your questions there. We would love to hear from you. Again, we won't be able to get to all of them, I'm afraid, but please put them in there, and we'll be putting those questions to Behrouz and David after our keynote speech. We'd love to hear from you. Questions about what they've talked about tonight, your thoughts on 2020, your questions for 2021, where to here for greater justice and dignity for people seeking asylum. Just click that little Q&A button down the bottom of your screen. Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, joining us from New Zealand. Behrouz Boochani is a writer, journalist, filmmaker, adjunct associate professor at UNSW, and senior adjunct research fellow at the University of Canterbury. He's a Kurdish-Iranian refugee who was imprisoned by Australia on Manus Island from 2013 till effectively 2019, when he was moved to Port Moresby and then finally, thankfully, made it to New Zealand in December 2019, where he was eventually granted refugee status. His memoir, No Friend But the Mountains, Writing from Manus Prison, won the Victorian Prize for Literature, the Victorian Premier's Prize for Non-Fiction, a special award in the New South Wales Premier's Literary Awards, the Australian Book Industry Award for General Non-Fiction Book of the Year, and the Australian National Biography Award. He also made a film documenting life on Manus Island with a phone in his camera with Iranian filmmaker Arash Kamali Savestani, called Chalker, Please Tell Us the Time. Behrouz's compassion, his powerful writing, and his fierce advocacy for his fellow detainees and fellow refugees challenges and enlightens us all. It is an absolute honour to have him join us tonight as our keynote speaker for the 2020 Refugee Legal, not the annual dinner. Would you please give a very warm virtual welcome to Behrouz Boochani. Over to you, Behrouz.
Hello, thank you very much for introduction. I think it was 2 years ago that we had the same event. And I should say that I really feel sorry that still we should talk about the same issue. Still, of course, many of the refugees are already released, but still many people are in detention in Australia and in Port Moresby, in Nauru. So it's really sad story. And, you know, my experience as a person who was in Manus Island, I was really struggling with this system. It's really now that I am here after a year that I'm free in New Zealand. And sometimes when I speak with the refugees in detention in Australia and in Port Moresby, it's really difficult. And now I understand that how it is difficult for people who are working in this field. I mean, the advocates and people who are supporting the refugees, people who are working with the refugees. And that remind me of my friends, Omi Tofikian, Munes Mansoubi, that they translated my works, and also Janet Galbraith, and many people who Arnold, all of the people that I used to work with them. And now I really understand that how it's difficult. I mean, emotionally it's difficult when you work and with people who are in detention. And I think that's why, you know, always I acknowledge the people, the a part of the society who are really fighting against this system. But here I think it's good, and I would like to acknowledge everyone who are really fighting, and many of them, many of the advocates that I know and I work with them, they still, you know, they have been in this field, they have been fighting against this system. Many of them are not known in public. People are didn't hear about them, but I know that they are fighting and working on the ground. That's why I think David mentioned Martin. He's a Kurdish refugee who is in one of those hotels in Australia, that he released a picture and he's looking at the city and he say that I cannot touch it. And I think when I look at that picture, I mean the picture of the refugees who are in the hotels, who are in the balcony, and they are looking at the city for many years. I think it's very scary picture. It's very scary that now that Australian government now actually take the prison into the public and spread it in the public. You know, they are a part of the city. They are a part of the city, and people are able to see them. People gather there. People look at them, and that is very scary because of that how they normalize this, you know, now became normal in Australia, that keeping innocent people in prison is very normal in Australia. And that is scary. That is scary because of the principles, because of the values that this society is losing and has lost actually. And I think always I say that you don't only keep the refugees in detention. Actually, you are damaging your political culture. the values that your society as a liberal democracy, as a society, it doesn't matter actually is liberal democracy or not, as a society, as a community, you know, you are losing that values. And that's why you are not only damaging the refugees, that is very clear. And I think people should think about this, that you are not only damaging the refugees, you are damaging many principles, that these principles keep the society alive, keep the actually this democracy alive. And that's why it's really difficult and scary. It's very scary picture. Another thing that when I think about that picture, I think about the refugees who were in Manus Island, and they were fighting against this system for many years. And actually they created a knowledge of resistance. They proved that the refugees are not passive. The refugees have something to say. They impact on the society. They contribute to the society. And now we see that these people, they took this knowledge from Manus Island, that culture and knowledge of resistance, that experience of resistance for many years to Australia. And now they are actually introducing that in those hotels. We see these days that some of these refugees are speaking out, they are talking with the media, they are active, they are doing advocacy for others. And I think that is valuable, that these people are not passive. You know, the people like the musicians like Farhad Bandesh, Moz, Kazem Kazemi, and other people like Farad Rahmati, the Amin Afrawi, and Thanos from Sri Lanka. You know, all of these people and many others, really, they are doing advocacy, they are doing activity, and they are in touch with a part of the society in Australia. They are working with them. And I think that is very important, that these people are not just some people who are, they have nothing to say and they are passive. They are not passive. And I think that is important, that these people are now actually they became a part of the society. They are in the detention, but now they are a part of the society. And I think that is very important. Many of people in Australia are in touch with them and are working with them. And I think that is beautiful. So another thing I would like to mention is about actually, so I mentioned here that why, yeah, I mentioned it here that I don't forget it. Yeah. So yeah, the thing is that about this, your organization and the organization who are working to support the refugees, I think we should look at this, that in Australia, the refugees, so in Manus Island was quite a different story, and Nauru. So the refugees were on that place, especially, it was very clear. So that was they were using Manus land and Nauru to as a land of exile, to actually punish people. And now, actually, on that time we were in between a place between law, I mean, between law and in-law situation. I mean, lawful and unlawful situation. Like we were victim under law, and in other side, we didn't have access to law. You know, I mean, that paradox was the philosophy of that, you know, this exile policy, that we were victim, we were impact under law, and in other side, we didn't have access to law. And in Australia, that happened again, but in a different way. So in Australia, now these people are in detention for many years, and there is not a law in that country to protect people. You know, there is not a law. We cannot challenge someone like Peter Dutton, that he has done lots of crimes, and all of us know there is not a law to protect the refugees in front of this horrible man. And I say horrible man because what he's doing now, actually, he cannot even justify that. Before, he could justify that for some part of the society, you know. How he is able to justify this? He cannot. And I think that's why I think that it is sadism. That is sadism. And if we return to that picture, I mean, the people in the hotel, unfortunately, it seems that a part of the society in Australia enjoy that sadism, enjoy that these refugees, these people, innocent people, are suffering. And I think Peter Dutton is aware of that a part of the society enjoy that. That's why he is doing this. They are spreading this torture, this prison in the cities. And you know, in Brisbane, you see that is a part of the city. So that is, I think, that is a question, that why we cannot challenge Peter Dutton, why we cannot challenge immigration, and if they are able to keep people in detention forever, and we cannot ask them in the court, we cannot actually challenge them that why you keep these people in detention, you know, and they don't have to explain to the public. And I think that is very, very sad, that how there is not a law in that country. And that really make all of us angry, that this man, I mean, Peter Dutton and his department are able to keep these people forever. That is my understanding of this, because the refugees no have access to law, actually, you know, and your organization and other organization, the lawyers are working, actually, they have a very difficult job. They have a difficult job, that how protect the refugees in front of this system. And that's why, but in some cases, of course, they are very successful, but generally it's very difficult. That's why they keep these people in detention. They are able to do that. And we should think about this, that it is an industry now in Australia, you know, keeping people in detention, because those companies who are behind this policy, no one investigate them. No one investigate them. And what do they want? They need people in detention. They need people. They need bodies in the detention. That's why they just keep people in detention. And now they don't have reason at all. So all of us, we know this. Just I wanted to mention that really it's very difficult for the lawyers to challenge this system. And I think I should mention something about the work that we are doing now I mean, I and Janet and Omid, and we did some works that hopefully we publish them soon. One of them is a journal, and another one is a play that we work with a group of Aboriginal artists, and some other works that this year we'll publish, and the journal will publish next month. So the reason I mentioned these works is that advocacy, of course, is important, is a part of this struggle, is very important. But in other side, I think it's very good that we work in a way to challenge the narrative towards the refugees, for challenging this narrative. Actually, we need to create and produce work. We need to, that is my understanding and my experience as a person who have been in touch with people and have worked, that for challenging this narrative, actually we need to create our own language. We need to create our works, you know, we need to create our stories. We need to share our stories. And why I mention these works is that these works are, in my perspective, of course, by writing a book or writing or publishing a journal or a movie or this, we cannot we cannot change the narrative. But I mean that if many people involved, many artists, writers, journalists, you know, people, academics, you know, if they work in this field, I think we are able to change something. So that's why I believe that we should work fundamentally. You know, they are fundamental work. And why? Because in these works that I mentioned, we link the this exile policy, and also in this detention industry, and how the Australia is treating the refugees. We link this to the history of colonialism in Australia, and how Australia actually treat the Aboriginal people. And that's why in these works, we invited the important voices and artists who are Aboriginal to be a part of these works. For example, in this journal, that hopefully we publish it, we release it next month or next 2 months. In this journal, some of the greatest writers and artists collaborated with the refugees, who are in Australia, detention, in Manus, Nauru, and even Indonesia. So someone like Tara Junwinch, Lukashenko, and another 3 Aboriginal writers and artists, that their works published alongside the refugees' works. The refugees who write their works, poetry, they created art. And I think that is very important. And another work is that that play that hopefully come out on February. So just I and Omid, we just collaborate with them. Just we share our ideas. They are actually working on Aboriginal kids in the custody. So this play is important because a part of it, they adopted from the book No Friend But the Mountains. And we had some meeting on the Zoom, and we worked together, we shared our ideas, and now they actually, we have a play which is about the refugees and also Aboriginal people. I think that is very important. And in New Zealand, I think there is not this link. There is not too much people really didn't work in this way. That is my understanding. But in Australia, I think it's very important that now we have people, you know, that they are working in this field. And I mean, the Aboriginal people, they involve and they link this policy and how they treat the refugees and how they treat the Aboriginal people. And I think that is very important because we should learn from the indigenous resistance knowledge in Australia because they have been fighting and struggling against this system for many years, for hundreds years, that they are really fighting against this system, and they created a huge knowledge of resistance, a culture of resistance. And I think that is very important that we learn from them and work with them. And so I think I said everything I wanted to say, but generally we should actually, our struggle, our work is that just we are fighting just to record this part of history, which is sad, which is a very dark part of the history. And again, I am really sorry that now in Australia, in the cities in Australia, we see that they actually take the prison into the city and spread, and it's actually normalized this, you know, it's very normal now in Australia for many people in Australia. And I think that is very sad and very, very scary for the principles, for the values, and for democracy. Yeah, thank you. I don't know how long I talk.
Thank you, Behrouz. That was beautiful, mate. Thank you so much for that beautiful collation of your thoughts. Much appreciated. I ask you to stay on the call, and David Mann will join us as we go through some questions. But that was a really really striking and, as I say, challenging speech, identifying how normalized our immigration system has become, how people in detention and those who have left detention are not passive victims at all, but passionate advocates for their rights who are demanding their dignity. The sadistic nature of Australia's system is something you pointed out. And you also recognized the fact that there is an industry in Australia. There are people who profit from the way that we treat refugees in this country. And you know, it's important to follow the money a lot of the time and recognize that that is a factor in this. And of course, also, you know, tying the struggle for refugee rights to First Nations justice as well, which is always crucial and something to keep in mind. So thank you again. Thank you to everyone who is submitting questions through the Q&A function. You're very welcome. Please submit them through the Q&A function there. We really appreciate people chipping in questions. As I say, we won't be able to get to all of them, but we will get to as many as possible. Please chip them in there as you go, and we'll do our best to put them into Behrouz and David. Also, a very quick plug to donate money to this wonderful organization. You've heard from David, you've heard from Behrouz. You know about the important work that Refugee Legal does. Maybe you're a little bit drunker now and would like to chip in some money. Refugee Legal receives no federal government funding. There is an extraordinary amount of goodwill from corporate law firms and from volunteers, as David mentioned, but it really does live and breathe on the support of generous people such as yourself who've joined us tonight. So you can go to refugeelegal.org.au/donate if you want to help out. Behrouz, firstly to you, just a very quick question. Some people are asking, you know, how is your life in New Zealand now? How are you adapting to life in New Zealand?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that is very interesting that people ask a question and they still following my story. And I think that is a part of it because they are kind people. And a part of it is because they have been a part of my struggle. And that's why I think when I got freedom, still people feel that they are a part of this story. And that's why I think is important. And that feeling came through contribution, you know, and that contribution I think is very important. That's why I say the refugees have their own voices. Just we should create this opportunity for them and let them to be a part of the main discourse. They should be a part of the discourse because this discourse is belong to them. And that's why I think it's very important, this contribution, you know, create change. So that's why I think that is my analyze about why people are interested in my story, that what I am doing. But I have a simple life, so I live by myself. And so just I have a simple life. I do writing, but I'm not actually in social media like before because it's take too much energy of me. It's very toxic, and I need just to settle down and work. And so I work. I go to the university every day. Most of the time I'm in the library there, but I'm noticed sometimes too. So I go around. Yeah, so I'm not like this, just always be in the library. But yeah, so it's very normal life.
A very naughty guy. There you go, everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, yes, people are very invested in your story, but something that you've always done, Behrouz, is use the attention on you to amplify the voices and stories of other people. And I'd be interested to know from your connections and your friends in Port Moresby, people in immigration detention in Australia, and we know some people have been resettled in the US through the resettlement program. What are the stories, or what are you hearing from your friends across all those different locations as to how people are doing? People who've gone through the Australian immigration.
It's really difficult. It's really difficult. That's why I say that now I understand how it's difficult to work with the refugees, with detainees. It's emotionally is difficult. And I remember last year, I think 6-7 months ago, I wrote a story about this. And I say that it's very difficult emotionally, because I know those people and I know their stories, their background, and I know how this system is cruel. And that's why emotionally is difficult for me. And I'm not a kind of person to hide myself behind the morality and this, but really, and generally I'm not an emotional person, but it's really difficult. Yeah, just you talk with people that you see that, you know, for example, some of the people that I know, they sent them to Manus Island when they were 18 years old, and now they are 25, you know, and that is really, of course, that is unacceptable. It's difficult. It's difficult. But we should say that we achieved a lot too. Lots of people already released, but now really these people who are in detention in Australia, in Port Moresby, in Nauru, it's really difficult to follow their stories, to talk with them. Yeah, but I'm in touch with them. Not all of them, of course, but with some of them.
Yeah, thank you. There is a lot of love for you, Behrouz, coming through in the chat, and thank you very much. People really appreciative of you for joining us tonight and sharing your story. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
David, you're welcome on their behalf. David, a question to you. What do you see on the horizon for refugee rights for 2021 in Australia? I suppose that's what a lot of folks are wondering. Where to from here, and what's coming up next year, do you think?
Yeah, well, look, there are a number of campaigns, and one of them is Time for a Home, and really that campaign is seeking the release and resettlement of all people detained in Australia in the circumstances and others that the circumstances I mentioned and others, but and really it's I think that has to be at the forefront of all of our work, of all of our advocacy. You know, I just think one of the great injustices of our times is the indefinite detention of people across the country, including in, you know, so we've been talking about hotels in the suburbs of Melbourne and Brisbane, and trying to, you know, as part of that advocacy, there'll be multiple strategies, and I think that needs to be thought about carefully. Some people may well advocate through the law, you know, like we do. It's not the only thing we do, but continue to seek, seek justice in the courts. But there are so many other ways that people can be involved, and I think that it's really about stories. I mean, Behrouz was talking about stories. We need to change the story in this country so that it's not normalised. You know, in a way, the indefinite detention of people, which has been going on now for in many decades, indefinite detention of asylum seekers and refugees and migrants, we've become inured to it as a country, and I think, so it's almost like the nation doesn't flinch now at the locking up of people indefinitely for years on end and destroying them. And so I think that has to be at the heart of it. I mentioned before that why that's so important too. It's not just that liberty is so central to someone's, you know, flourishing as a human being, and the deprivation of it so terribly, terribly destructive. But also, I do think that detention has become the foundation, if you like, in many ways, for many of the other terrible injustices and cruelties. You know, it's almost like if you can lock up an innocent child or a woman or a man indefinitely, other terrible abuses and cruelties become possible. You know, and so I think that's one of the, and I also think as part of that, what we're seeing too, Tom, escalating dramatically across the country in that context is people being locked up indefinitely on the basis of the cancellation of their visa on character grounds, for example. With this again, one of the terrible injustices in our society of people being, you know, with a double punishment, effectively after any sentence they've served, then for the very same subject matter, being locked up indefinitely at the behest of the executive of the government, often for years, and many of these people are refugees. So it's a double punishment of the worst kind. So there's that. I also think that some of the other issues that we need to continue to fight for justice on are the temporary protection issue and for change, but in the meantime to ensure that people get the legal help they need, but really for change so that people are not left in a twilight world and re-traumatised, living in the community and never able to go back and separated from family. I think that's critical. I also think that we need to be advocating for a refugee sponsorship program, a little bit like the Canadian one, where, you know, we almost say to government, you know, stop infringing on our right to be generous and let us, you know, decide as citizens, you know, let us have the ability to be generous and to get together in groups and sponsor refugees. I mean, from overseas to resettle. So there's some of I think some of the challenges amongst many. But yeah, there is that big question too, and I'll finish with this on: is change likely? Well, change is always on the horizon, as is hope. I mean, hope in a way is a condition. It's a dimension of the soul, if you like. It's a spirit, but it also in many of the stories that we see with the work that we do, there is real hope of change in individuals' lives, changing the course of their lives. But I also think that, as we know with change, you have to lay the foundations for it and make the case for it. And we need to do that together. Change the story in this country. So many people want to see change, and you know, so that we have fair and humane policies that reflect who we are.
Yeah. Quick question from Janet here. I've been volunteering from Sydney since you moved to remote clinics. Do you think you'll continue remote clinics in 2021?
Without any doubt. And, you know, one of the, I mean, you know, it's becoming trite to say this, but nonetheless, it is fundamentally true from our end that, you know, while the pandemic has posed real challenges, it's also genuinely provided for us some real insights into doing things differently in the future and major opportunities. And one of them actually, we're really excited about is that there are really clearly major opportunities for increasing access for asylum seekers and migrants to get help from us, you know, improving and increasing access. But also, one of the remarkable aspects of the pandemic has been even more volunteers springing up all around the country wanting to volunteer. So there's that question goes to the very heart of it, that we have volunteers around the country who are providing direct legal help under our clinic program, for example, under the supervision of refugee legal staff, of lawyers and paralegals and admin. And so yes is the answer to it, but it will grow because there is no doubt that it works, that the online, it's not perfect, but the online assistance that we've been able to adapt to more and more is providing not only greater opportunities for people to get legal help, but greater opportunities for people that want to help.
Yeah, great. Behrouz, a question here asking your thoughts on New Zealand's approach to refugee resettlement, whether you have thoughts on the differences between the two countries, what we can learn from New Zealand, and whether you see much hope of a New Zealand deal or a resettlement deal being reached between our country and theirs. Do you see much hope there?
Yeah, I think in terms of the refugees, you cannot learn a lot from New Zealand because New Zealand is not perfect. And I mean, the immigration system, and they just get 1,500 refugees per year. And but of course, New Zealand has, I think what is different between New Zealand and Australia is that the good thing with New Zealand is that when you are free in the community and they are processing your case, you really don't feel the system. You don't feel the system. But in Australia, the refugees who are in the community, and it seems they are free, they always feel the system. They always think that the system is chasing them. They always think that they feel it, that system is actually just following them and chasing them to, you know, they don't feel safe in front of the system. They never feel safe. And that's why many of the refugees who are in community and they didn't process them for many years, they actually don't feel safe, and they have, you know, they are facing mental problem, depression, and, you know, and it's really difficult in Australia to be a refugee. You always, in your home, when you go to the cinema, I mean, I am talking about the refugees who are in the community. When you are traveling, when you are driving, when you are working, always you feel the system. But in New Zealand, it's not like that. In New Zealand, just you trust in the system. The system just process your case, and you have a lawyer, and sometimes you should just talk with your lawyer. So that is, I think, the difference between New Zealand and Australia. And I think many of the refugees who, you know, we have suicide, you know, in the community. Lots of the refugees are just isolated from all of this came from the system. And all of this violation created and produced by the system. That is different between Australia and New Zealand. but hopefully that they, you know, accept this offer. Yeah, hopefully. I don't know. That is a very clear story, and I think I no have idea actually about that, because that is Australia should accept that. Yeah, although New Zealand didn't do any activity about that, and that's why sometimes I say that New Zealand got credit for doing nothing. You know, for many years. Yeah, for many years, New Zealand created this beautiful picture in Australia and internationally, but actually they didn't. So the refugees still are in detention, you know. So it's like this. That yeah.
It's important to not.
Yeah, I want to give you this.
New Zealand.
I want to give you this ice cream, and but I should
They
get
come through.
permission. Yeah.
It's true. People might be surprised. Yes, New Zealand actually
Yes,
takes
you
fewer
see.
refugees
Yeah.
per capita than Australia does. Yeah, David, you have conversations sometimes privately with people in Canberra and political figures. Do you see much hope for a New Zealand resettlement deal in the near future between Australia and New Zealand?
I think it's likely at some point, out of pure pragmatism, I think, because you know, at the end of the day, there is going to be at some point an end to the US resettlement deal. I think that really what I pick up is that the sort of intransigence and sort of myopic or linear, if you like, position that's been taken by, which is the kindest way I could possibly put it, the linear thinking, to the extent there is any thinking, underpinned by the deterrence agenda, has been very much focused on exhausting the US resettlement deal and before going to New Zealand. I mean, my view, I have to say, of the sort of deal with Jackie Lambie, you know, that was done, was really that behind the scenes, that, you know, this is my view anyway, is that it's very unlikely that any true concession was made, although it may have appeared to be the case, true concession to her. That my view is that in these sorts of situations, all options are always on the table. Actually, it's just whether that's admitted or conceded by governments in Australia in this context, and you know, and the lack of concession or the lack of sort of, if you like, you know, admission of that is partly just due to the deterrence agenda. This sort of strange idea that, you know, despite resettlement, despite bringing so many people, evacuating so many people to Australia, and there being no boats, despite resettling people to the US in significant numbers, no boats, despite Canada, no boat, you know, some people going, etc., despite Behrouz going to New Zealand and living in New Zealand, no boats coming to Australia. There still seems to be this sort of sense in Canberra that I pick up, you know, really, that it's almost like, you know, one, you know, brick out of the edifice and we'll see, you know, sort of everything will come crumbling down and we'll see an armada of boats descend on Australia. And I think that has been central to the intransigence, you know, beyond any reason of you know, being looking to New Zealand as an option. And but I think in pragmatic terms, I think it'll have to be an option in the future. Yeah. And you get little signs of that. I have to say, you asked behind the scenes. You certainly, what I'm really indicating is yes, you do get a sense that it is in fact in consideration. But then again, you know, we wait and see. Hey.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want to be suggesting here, Tom, that I know something that is about to be announced. Far from it, and I don't think I'd be the first to be told.
Well, you're best mates with these people, right? They love you.
Yeah. But yeah. Look, I think in the future it's going to be necessary.
Yeah. We're out of time, I'm afraid. Thank you so much to all the questions that people have submitted. Lots of people just sharing their heartfelt thanks to Behrouz. We will pass that all those beautiful notes on to Behrouz. I promise you that. We'll get them to him. Thank you for that. Very quickly, if I could just ask both of you, quite a few people are asking, what can I do? A constant call on these issues. People really want to help. They know how rotten things are and want to help out as much as they can, whether that's donating through Refugee Legal. But I guess individually, people who are watching us tonight, Behrouz, what is your advice? What are you asking or appealing people to do? What can they do to help people in detention and refugees who are victims of Australia's system?
Yeah, that is the very hard question, and very, always people ask this question. Yeah, it's very difficult, but to answer this question, but I think many people are doing a great job. They, what I believe, that is my understanding, that just do something, act, sometimes a small act, or like make a connection with someone in the detention, create a huge story in end. And I think that is just my experience. Sometimes I feel that if, for example, 7 years ago, if Janet Galbraith wouldn't try to contact with me, if Shane Basie, that I knew through him, I knew Munes Mansubi, my translator. And later, so, all of these stories relate to each other. And later, Omi Tawfiqian read one of my articles in Guardian, and he approached me, And later, no, that is only my story. Arash, through one of the articles that Omi translated, approached me, and we made that movie. All of this, I mean, that was a just connection. Or like Ben Doherty, if he wouldn't, I think I approached him. I don't know, I don't remember, but we created this connection. And now, if you see that really Ben Doherty, he recorded the history of this policy. If you look at all of his works, So I mean, just chasing the stories, and I think that's why I think Ben Doherty is very important. He's a journalist that he chased the story, Many journalists that I approached them, and I said, I'm a journalist, I'm in Manus, I'm in detention, they didn't care, But Ben Doherty followed that story. He recognized that, oh, someone is in detention and he wants to speak out. That is only my story, my personal story. So for all of the people in the detention, each person has a story. And I think that is important, that we try to help and create a space that the people, the refugees, contribute to the society. And I'm not only talking about the detention, even the refugees who are outside, who are in the community, when they come out, they really need support. They want to feel that they are a part of the society. They should have this opportunity to be able to contribute to the society. And when you contribute to the society, you like it. You feel you are belong, to this society. In end, I would like to invite, I don't want to invite you to watch my movie. I want to invite you to watch the movie, His House. This movie recently I watched, and I think the director, so this movie is about the refugee. It's quite a scary movie, but it's very important, that take us actually to the world of the refugees, how the refugees are actually marginalized in the society and what they are carrying. Because in Australia, in the West, they just look at the refugees from now. From that time, they are in the detention, But we we have background. I was 29 years old when Australia put me in detention. So I have 29 years life. So my life didn't start from Manus Island. That is only 6 years of my life. So I mean, generally, it's important that really these refugees, these detainees, the people who just came to the society or are in detention, we support them in this way. Many of the refugees don't need money. They are young, they work, they pay tax, you know? Just create this opportunity for them to contribute to the society in the way they want, on base of their skills, their understanding, their beliefs, and their values. So that is all my understanding of this. Yeah.
Thank you, Behrouz. David,
Thank
very
you.
quickly, any last words you'd like to say?
Well, I think Behrouz sort of said it really. And to me, it's do something. Don't just think, don't despair, do something. We all have different things that we can do. As Behrouz said, even small acts are so often big acts, actually. Be with someone, just give it, lend a hand of help or an ear. Just be with someone. And it's not all actually about helping people too. There was a really good question that came through, Tom, which we can get to, which went to, I think, part of the heart of it too. Is it just about helping refugees, or is it about actually refugees being part of, not extraneous to, but integral in our society, in the way that Behrouz was just really referring to, and part of the lifeblood of, a country, and able to fully participate, fully be part of and belong to a community and to, wherever it is. I think that's central. And I cannot state too strongly that we all have different things. There's no one thing that we should do, but we should act on our passion for change and write a new story, and as part of that. So there's lots of practical tips you can get on websites, but I think that's the heart of it. Do something.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Behrouz. And maybe that's something is give money to Refugee Legal if you like. That's one option if you have some spare money and maybe a bit drunker and more generous. Thank you, gentlemen. That was fantastic to have a chat to both of you. And thank you, Behrouz, particularly for joining us from New Zealand. To give a proper formal vote of thanks, it is my honour to introduce from Refugee Legal, Sophie de Rohan. Sophie,
I think I didn't mention the name of the movie. Is that right?
Oh, His House? His House?
Yeah, I mentioned it. Okay, no, I thought that I didn't. Yeah. His House. His House.
His House. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Behrouz. Over to you, Sophie.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you so much, Behrouz. And first off, I just wanted to say I'm sorry that we can't be face-to-face tonight, because I would get you to sign my copy of the book, which I have read a number of times. Thank you so much for your beautiful contribution tonight and your reflections on the system that you have been thrust into by the Australian government and pulled out of, in a way, by your own work and with some assistance from the New Zealand government. I was really struck by two things and their reflections from your book as well, and that is the way in which the Australian government completely stripped you and the other men who were detained with you on Manus of your humanity by curtailing your human rights and limiting your access to the outside world. And as Tom mentioned at the start of the evening, we've had like a tiny little sense of that this year. And I hope that people take away from that experience some empathy and some human connection. and have some small understanding of what it's like to have your rights stripped away from you. I contrast that part of your book with the power and importance of the creative work you do and the advocacy work you do, which is a reflection of your true humanity. My favorite part of your book is the dream sequence where you describe the woman named Yeswan. I apologize for my pronunciation, that Kurdish word. But I really felt the humanity in your description of love and what it is to love and be loved and experience those human emotions. And I really feel that if we can continue to connect these feelings of human love with each other and keep connected, then we will keep hope alive as we strive for this common humanity. And we'll keep finding this fight side by side with you and others so that we can help others to find their freedom. So thank you very much, Behrouz.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Very nice.
Thank you, Behrouz. Thank you very much, Sophie. Much appreciated. That pretty much brings us to the end of tonight's proceedings. Again, I want to say thank you so much to everybody for joining us. I know that particularly at the end of the year, these kind of online events can be just another thing, but you've rocked up, and we hope that you've got something out of tonight and enjoyed the proceedings, particularly our keynote speech. To finish up and to wrap up the night, I'm going to hand back to David Mann.
Look, I'll keep it very short. We're at time, and I really just wanted to profoundly thank you, Behrouz, for tonight and for everything that you have done and do. And speaking of connections, I can only say that we really would look forward to continuing a really deep connection with you. And so thank you.
Thank you very much, really. Yeah,
it means a huge amount to us, and your voice, is so profoundly important, and friendship. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm not good at greeting at all. When people say this kind of, I don't know what should I say.
No.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And deeply moving too, Behrouz. Just so deeply moving. And look, Tom, on the strength of tonight, I know you're inundated, as you said, and the pandemic's just sort of been. Just created all of these huge additional opportunities for you, but in all seriousness, on the strength of tonight, we'd like you to continue to be a refugee legal ambassador.
I've got the gig.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've earned it again. But no, in all seriousness, you really, Tom, continue to be one of our most loyal supporters, and talking about doing something, you do so much for us, but also for so many other organisations I know, but also just for the movement, if you like, for change, and so just once again, thanks so much, and look forward to continuing the conversation and looking at other ways to do things.
Thank you very much, David. Least I could do. It's a pleasure. Thank you, Behrouz. Thank you, David. Thank you to everybody for joining us, for your questions via the chat. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes at Refugee Legal for making tonight happen. Hope you enjoyed the food and the booze, and we look forward very much to seeing you in 2021 in person, in a room, and hopefully with more good news and greater rights and guarantees for refugees and people seeking asylum in this country. Have a wonderful end of the year, a Christmas / whatever you celebrate period, and we will see you in 2021. Good night.
Thanks, and thanks to everyone who was involved in organising this too. Thank you.